Hi everyone, welcome to Feature Bootcamp for Script Camp. My name is Connor. I'm the teacher instructor of most classes here, though we're adding new instructors quite frequently, getting different guests to come in and co-teach or do original classes or courses that we'll be announcing soon. We are doing, this is the free intro preview course of the 8-week feature program. So this is just like an overview of everything we're going to be doing, and also intended to somewhat start to narrow down your idea that you have and make sure that you're, first of all, to make sure that you're streaming on Discord, which would require me to click this button right here. There we go. Okay, so feel free to click that live button to watch along with this. But what was I saying? It was that you should be through this course. We'll be working through an entire draft of a feature, but you'll also just sort of be learning how to organize features in general, how to kind of think of structure, how to hold an entire structure in your head, and make sure that you're sticking to it as you return to the same page to the page to work on this day by day. So it's not just the goal is not just to write a script, it's to learn how to write a script, basically. Our first couple slides are going to be just troubleshooting audio, so look at that. If you have any issues hearing or being heard in the class, Script Camp is a screenwriting community that's focused on helping take you from concept to first draft, and to eventually polished script if you want to follow through with the rewrite courses, which we also do. We have lots of free classes, events, and workshops, and some paid with VIP member classes, bootcamps, and Writer's Lab, which is Saturdays 4 to 6. About me, I have been writing full-length scripts for about 11 years, wrote and directed musicals all through college, part of a student theater organization, moved to LA in 2015, and placed in Launchpad Top 10 feature contest 2 years later, which got me signed for the first time, and I've been signed ever since, and since then placed in Nickel quarterfinals, Nickel semifinals. I wrote an episode of Creepshow in 2019, and you can look at the rest of these if you want, but basically I have a thriller set up at a major production company now, and have taken meetings at many sort of prominent horror, thriller, and action kind of focused production companies around town. I teach these boot camps and weekly writers labs, and we have other guests come in and do these too. So what's the boot camp? This is going to take you from idea to first draft, but we always say, and the quick summary of this is that you should not necessarily worry if this draft is going to be good or not, and you should move beyond this idea that any individual draft needs to be good in the first place. You're always just sort of putting bricks in this long road that you need to build, and you shouldn't concern yourself too much with, is any single one of these going to be a masterpiece? Here's a breakdown of the different time frames for the different classes. Here's a breakdown of the entire feature course. And by the way, during this presentation, make sure to use the chat in our Discord if you want to ask questions. So let's look at the feature bootcamp schedule. So we start next week with Why This Story, where we'll refine the logline and make sure that we really have that one sentence nailed down, which is going to be the core constructing spine of your story that's going to guide the construction of everything else. You're going to fill out your sketchbook, meaning this is this sort of journal / collage of all your inspirations and ideas that you have for this feature that you haven't been able to sift into place yet. Week 2 is all about outlining, and we start in broad strokes on the 25th with complete story beat summary, which is kind of like a zoomed out 3-page outline of the entire movie's story. So basically like a page per act, more or less. It's kind of what we call a 3-sheet in terms of deliverables. So the week after that is going to be about scene cards, where we write out a single paragraph for each scene. Next, we go into March 11th is when we start on actual pages. And we will go from there about 20 pages a week to stay on course with that's the milestone that we're trying to hit. Week 5, we go into transitions, so we move from the first act to the second act. Week 6, Act 2A. Week 7, Act 2B. And Week 8 is going to be Act 3. So it means the first half of this course is going to be almost all pre-writing and outlining, which is just the practical and step-by-step method that I always talk about. Involves just going from thing to thing to thing. So we go from idea to logline to our sketchbook to our treatment, or you could say synopsis, like story beat synopsis, and then you go into cards, and then once you have a full paragraph for each scene, and you will know what happens on every page of the story before you begin. We don't like to have any kind of uncharted waters before we go in, or at least, do as much as you can to organize. And it's important to do this not just because it will help you see all the pieces for the story before you go into it, and like if we move sort of beyond the idea of just opening a blank document and seeing where it kind of goes, like screenwriting is more like short story writing than anything else, and just a short story has, comparatively compared to something like a novel, so few working pieces that you have to like really carefully tune them, and like that's easiest done if you have a very, very strong blueprint going into it. So that's why I like to sort of emphasize structuring and plotting beforehand without kind of wanting to drift. Like if you find yourself drifting too far from the outline, it probably means you should go back and change your outline. So it's not meant to seem restrictive. It's just meant to kind of like nail down a really strong process for this, because I find that's the easiest way for me to work and to move forward. So take whatever from this works for you, and just use this to complement whatever it is that you do on your own. So Writers Lab, Saturdays 4 to 6. These are intensive weekly development sessions where me and sometimes other guests will be helping boot campers with specific problems in their scripts. You can also just buy basically a ticket to one of these through our scriptcamp.net website if you want to. Just come by for one of these if you have like a really tough spot in a script that you are having trouble getting through, or you are like not able to nail the tone of a scene, or you just want general like suggestions on anything that you're struggling with in a story. So that's going to be every weekend, I should say. What's next? We have how to enroll. Yes, go to scriptcamp.net/classes. So this is the free intro this week right now that we're doing currently. But if you want to join the rest of these, scriptcamp.net, go to either classes to buy this course on its own, or you can sign up for free trial for our only $49 a month unlimited membership, scriptcamp.net/membership. That's free trial is 2 weeks, so you get 2 free classes after this. And then it's only $49 a month for a ton of content, really. So highly suggest trying it out. Give it a shot. All right, guy selling thing asks for money. So here's the breakdown of the membership, and then let's move on. So, okay, script finished in 8 weeks. I mentioned all this stuff before. We don't need to go over it again. Will this draft be amazing? Probably not. And you should not expect any first draft to be amazing, and no one starts good at anything, and blah, blah, blah. You just need to get scripts done. That's why we sort of encourage you to not use old, like, magnum opus ideas that you have had or have been working on for many years, but instead pick newer, more exciting, sort of spur-of-the-moment ideas that you're like, that would just sort of be funny, or that would just be weird, or, not that they should be disposable or that you shouldn't try, but just that, remember, we're thinking of this as flexing muscles and doing reps at the gym more than anything else. So always remember, this was part of the exercise of, it's like, what do they do in all the just spy movies where they like entrust a dog to the trainees, and then at the end of it they make them shoot the dog? Is that in all the spy movies or just in Kingsman? I can't remember. But that's why we sort of like do this exercise of separating from these ideas, because we're like, we have to get used to the idea of these scripts not working out, which is sort of like a big part of becoming a screenwriter beyond just the learning how to put words on the page, is getting used to the idea of scripts not panning out. So I would suggest kind of accustoming yourself to that, and like acclimating to that idea that a lot of if you want to write for the movies, a lot of the stories that you want to do, no one will ever see. Yes, we know, and no one will ever like even read. And just the fact that you've pieced them together in the way that you have naturally, because you've been learning and you're just like improving at this, will be it's still in such a state that most people won't even read all the way through it or enjoy it at all. And like, so once you understand that, we have to, that's just the hurdle we have to jump over in untethering from our stories and being like, oh, this is not really a natural, easy medium to write in. And there's a lot of really specific little rules and nuances, and this is much more sort of like, it feels like there's a lot more rules in place than in novel writing or playwriting. There definitely kind of are in a lot of ways. and you just have to be paying attention to so many more things. So just keep in mind this is a really complex form of writing, and it's like I do not believe anyone has ever started good at it. I definitely did not start good at it, and most ideas will not go anywhere, and that's okay, and that's just part of doing this. That was a long-winded explanation. Okay, so yeah, your goal is basically just to become this sort of generator of unlimited ideas. You're valuable not just because you have written one thing that's going to change the world or whatever, but you just are a writer who can fix and diagnose and change around ideas, and that's how you get employment in Hollywood, is not just from writing amazing specs, but through rewriting other people, through helping out on staffs and more collaborative ways. So don't think of this as like purely solitary. You need to really just do this and develop the skills necessary to execute scripts consistently on a quick time frame and in about 8 to 12 weeks with a high level of quality as possible. And you also just need to understand that this course is not intended to coach you into writing one specific script that will go anywhere, get you meetings, reps, or money. It takes many years of writing to get to that level. Okay, you get it. Let's move on. Scrolling down from here. So yeah, pick a newer, fresher idea for the bootcamp. Ideas that you are less attached to or invested in, not old ideas you've been working on for a long time. It's your job to write a bunch of bad scripts to get to the good ones. So here's a bunch of myths and assumptions that you can look at if you want to. I think you get the idea. We have a lot of slides here, so I'm not going to go through every single one. But there's a lot of people think you need a degree or some kind of connections to do this. You don't need any connections at all. You don't need any education at all. There is only the obstacle of getting really, really good at screenwriting and then getting your material into the right people's hands and getting read by them, and then persisting at this as projects fall apart for 100 years. It's a real job. It's just very frustrating and challenging and difficult. And this page should, and these pages on this slideshow should just give you a preview of that kind of idea. I mean, I'm gonna skip through them for now. Very doom and gloom. Yeah, screenwriting's hard. If you're here, you want to write movies. Let's keep going. So why do you want to write a movie? Because you want to be a professional screenwriter, because you want to get better at this and view this again as flexing kind of muscles, doing reps at the gym. You want to direct the movie yourself, perhaps, or if you want to write as a fun hobby for sort of personal enjoyment. But again, this is a long road that you must build to get to the point where you're writing anything that is going to be of substantial quality. And so just look at these as bricks in the road. All right, so the way this goes, slide 25 is going to be idea to first draft. Here's the breakdown of the 8 weeks. We start with the logline. That's just one sentence that expresses the idea of the movie. So that's going to usually tell us who is the main character, and an adjective that describes them in such a way as to imply what their internal journey will be, something that they're perhaps in conflict with, or something that will be relevant, or something that ties them personally to the stakes of this quest. So an adjective protagonist, when an inciting incident occurs, or when or after an inciting incident occurs, an adjective protagonist must conflict before / or else the stakes. That's what a standard logline format is going to kind of look like. We'll then go to the sketchbook, which is, again, that collage of unsorted ideas that you're going to draw from to fit into a more organized outline that comes next, which is the story beats outline. This is where you're going to list out the events of the plot, more or less scene by scene, although it can be in sort of some of them blocks might be more like sequences, but you want to just kind of explicate what's going to occur in the story in the right order. And then we have these scene cards where you're going to split each of those into each individual scene will get its own paragraph, its own little card that says, I even put little titles over them too, so it sort of sums up what occurs in that scene. If it's like, Jackson overcomes the crocodile, then like there's going to be a fight scene between a guy and a crocodile, and it ends when he kills the crocodile. Where am I getting this? But you get the idea. You want to put little titles at the top of those scenes that just clarify the point. And then we're going to go to pages, which is a term that's used all the time. It means you're going to actually start formatting in screenplay format, using either I say write or duet, and that's what I recommend everyone use. If you're not sure what to use, then that is the best one. It comes with a free version that you can do almost everything you need, or Final Draft or whatever it is you're using. But we are not actually going to start using that format for several weeks of this. Remember, it's almost all going to be just Google Docs and pre-writing for a while, and I recommend using Google Docs over Microsoft Word or Evernote or anything like that, but just preferably something cloud-based, so everyone's not sending old docx files to each other that no one knows how to open, or you get the idea. Okay, so if you're sharing documents in the class, either stick with Google Docs links or PDFs. Let's talk briefly about structure. Actually, let me see if we have any questions so far. Any questions from anyone in the chat? Someone says, Seal says, my internet is suffering at the moment. It would be best to attend the next introduction sessions. That sounds fine. Well, we have them at the start of every boot camp. So check back in 8 weeks. You'll find another feature bootcamp intro. We also have TV pilot bootcamp, rewrite bootcamp, and soon to be announced playwriting bootcamp starting up. Any other questions? Here's a question. Why is someone running a weed whacker outside on that side of my apartment and there's not even a lawn? It's just a parking lot. What are they, just swinging a weed whacker around in a parking lot? Okay, so, here's a question from Joe. Is time travel stories, are they still off the table? That's for your protection. That's not from me. That's not because I hate you. It's not because I hate time travel. It's because you will regret it, and it's that's like not a challenge to be taken. That don't cross the streams. Thank you, Nacho. It's too dangerous. You'll burn yourself. Just don't do it. 8 weeks to write a time travel movie? Are you kidding? How hard is it to make a normal movie that's not a time travel movie make sense in a first ever draft? And then consider that even a fantastically written time travel movie, a bunch of people don't even really agree on how the specific rules of it worked in the first place. And it's confusing to at least someone. And there's going to be kind of plot holes in it and things that don't quite add up. And like, if you look at Back to the Future really close, it doesn't make any sense at all, right? So, you see what I mean? Just don't do it. Joe Toole says, will we be going over individual stories today? I understand that it's likely won't. Yeah, we'll have time. We can look at loglines today. Try to distill it down into one sentence per story, and we can help you decide between up to 3 of them and give feedback on them. Other questions? Maria says she'll be sharing a new feature she's working on. Okay, great. I'm going to move on, but feel free to keep leaving questions or comments in the chat. So, what is structure going to be? I think we all kind of know the basics of these things. It's like, we've all heard these kinds of presentations before. We all sort of know what structure is, at least generally. We know it's the order of events in the story. It's ultimately, though, like, the thing that is going to be making, like, the glue that is going to be making scenes hold together is this question of, can you ask the question, or I'm sorry, can you answer can you say, and this one scene is causing the next scene to happen? God, I'm a stuttering fool. If you're making sure that every scene is causing the sequential scene to occur, then we can describe it with the phrase "and then" rather than so then rather than "and then." And if it's just a bunch of kind of unconnected events, then it's going to feel like, and also that thing happened, and also that thing happened. Whereas, like, in a really consistent, strong story, it will feel like a chain of sort of dominoes is falling, and one thing is knocking into the next domino, which is knocking into the next domino. So, like, which we usually understand the dominoes to be rising in size and prominence and, like, story importance, and that events are escalating in tension and danger throughout. So you're going to know you have structure problems if any of these one things kind of feel flimsy, or if it feels like, I don't know, the danger is lessening as the story goes on, or the character's quest feels a little too easy, or it becomes impossible at the halfway mark, and then they're kind of aimlessly wandering for the rest of it. So these are all, like, you will really start to see structural problems when you look at a lot of, I guess I would say, work by people who are still learning. You start to see certain patterns where you're like, where people sort of start to lose story focus, and there's a lot of saggy kind of middle acts, like second acts, where we just sort of like start making up additional obstacles for the main character to do that aren't really like escalating in intensity in the way that they need to, in both cost and toll on the main character, but also, like, you know, it could be progress from their goal that they're losing. We just need to make sure that we're keeping as strong a structure as possible throughout the pre-writing stage, which is why we spend so much time on pre-writing. It's to find these weak and saggy bits that are in danger of holding the story down, and like address those and shore those up with the drill and the, you know, plywood and whatever, and make sure that the whole thing doesn't fall down later. So structure is your friend, it is not your enemy. We just mean to say, don't really like battle it way too much until you know the norms and expectations and how a script should sort of feel before you mess with this way too much. I mean, ultimately, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but this is not like a set of manacles slapped on you by the man. But by the time you're done with the multiple rewrites and everything, your pages and your page numbers will have shifted around so much ultimately that this isn't going to really feel as formulaic as you might be fearing moving into this. If you're like, oh, if my catalyst is on page 15, everyone's going to think my movie's predictable. It's probably not the case, and it may not even be page 15 by the time you're done writing it. So I always say don't really worry too much about that. So you got to really just read a lot of scripts, though. That's the most important thing you can do to get better at this, is read lots and lots and lots of scripts. I say at least one a week, up to 3. You can read them off the most recent blacklists, which we can link to. And also, just Google the name of your favorite movie, and you can almost certainly find a PDF of a script of it. Try not to look at the transcripts or shooting scripts. See if you can find like the earliest versions you can. Although for certain stuff, you may only be able to find shooting scripts, so just go with what you can. Okay, just because we have foreign and art house sort of structures, I understand that, of course, these things exist, but it doesn't mean that readers are necessarily going to be in tune with what you're trying to do. And so, like, if you are using some sort of bold, brand new, avant-garde structure or experimental thing with your movie, then it has to blow the reader away, basically, in order for them to register it. If you do, like, an okay job, and it seems like you're doing a kind of bizarre avant-garde thing that the reader doesn't understand, then they're going to just start docking your shenanigans as ignorance at a certain point, which you just have to kind of accept, like, the idea that we are... If the more niche and strange and bizarre of a thing that you are writing, the less people will like it. And that's just the truth. And that might mean that you're writing that doesn't necessarily always mean that you're writing terrible stuff. It might mean that you're just serving one sort of specific flavor of thing that very few people will like. If you're imagine, like how many times did any great author get rejected because what they were doing was sort of avant-garde at first or whatever. I mean, Harry Potter gets rejected at everywhere in town, or, I'm sure Charlie Kaufman got shot down all over the place at first. And the thing is, you might be serving like a sort of what we call like kiwi on pizza, and that's like a flavor that maybe 1 or 2 people will like, including yourself, which might not mean that it's terrible, but it means it's going to be very hard to get a reader to respond to that positively and help you forward. So this is just to say you should learn the structural benchmarks and sort of conventions and like what the readers expect before you start saying, I'm going to do a whole different magic show and blow everyone's minds, because you have to actually blow their minds when you do that. Okay, so story structure essentials. We all kind of know the basic shape of stories, I think, because we all have heard them growing up. We all know once upon a time there was this person, and every day they were like this until one day, which is sort of the catalyst or the plot point 1 as it's marked here on the chart, though keep in mind that we always call these act breaks in screenwriting. We don't call them plot points. That's purely a novel writing convention. So what's a fairy tale look like? Act 1, once upon a time, is our beginning. there was a main character. We're learning our exposition and about our sort of world by hearing their normal thing. Every day they did what? Chores around the house, whatever it is. Until one day, inciting incident, a wolf howled outside and scared them out of the house. And then that sort of plot point leads us to our sort of first act break, which is moving from one sort of world to the next world. So, the girl runs out of the house into this dark, scary woods. I'm not actually telling a real fairy tale right now. This is just an example of, the archetypes of how the shape that we know stories to work in. So Act 2 is going to be the character in that new upside-down kind of different, could be scary, dangerous new world, that they've walked through this kind of doorway into that, and the action is intensifying so that each scene, as it topples into the domino of the next scene, these dominoes are getting larger, and the scale of the conflict is increasing. That's our rising action, all the way leading us up to our kind of all is lost moment, where our main character seems as if they have either failed at their goal or they're on the verge of failing at that goal, which drags us down into the sort of valley of despair right before our second act break moment, which is our break into 3. As we emerge from the kind of bottom of your character's experience at the absolute low point, they kind of come to terms with something they've learned over the course of the story, or they maybe re-encounter some old ally that reminds them of something they've learned, or just essentially the theme of the movie comes to them and they become a representation of that theme in some way, and they take sort of one last swing at the antagonistic force, whatever that is, and then they win or they lose or something else happens. Usually they either win or they lose, but if something else happens, we should still understand if your main character succeeded or failed at their goal as it was clearly defined, because good screenwriting is very, very much about having clearly defined, trackable character goals that we always know what your main character is trying to do. And this is something that comes up all the time in student work, is we just don't know what the main character is ultimately trying to do, or it doesn't seem like they want it that badly. So keep in mind, we have to have both of those things in place. You have to have your main character that really wants something, and it should be something that we as an audience can also sort of be like, oh, I either want that thing also, or I can understand wanting that thing if I was in that situation. And maybe watching this person now go through and get that thing for themselves will create this sort of, cathartic experience for me in the wish fulfillment sense of I wish I could solve this problem in that way, or I wish I could solve my problems in that way. You know what I mean? Or it might be, if it's like a monster movie, obviously we don't want to really... The wish fulfillment of a monster movie is not that we want to sort of be in that situation, but it does activate something sort of primal and nervous in us, this response of oh, if there was a monster hunting me, what would I do to get away from it? So I guess these are just things to think about in terms of what specifically does your main character want, and how is that something that we know will grab an audience because it's something they themselves also kind of want, right? We all sort of want to at least, when someone leans forward and tells a character in a movie, oh no, don't go through that door, go through the other door, that's the kind of thing we're sort of cultivating and wielding against an audience for their own entertainment in a weird way. That's, I think, you guys get the general structure of this. After our break into 3, we have the ramp up into the climax, and then we have our, a little time for a denouement or some kind of conclusion. You don't have that much time for it in features, though. Keep in mind, you have 5... If you go on much longer than 5 pages after the climax, people are going to start checking their watches and being like, wait, really? There's more of this? And there's even more of this? So careful with not dragging on your ending too long. Let's continue through this. Just some story archetype images here from Kurt Vonnegut, which I think are funny, but are not sort of what exactly we're writing. Some other images of worldwide story structures like Kyusho Tenketsu here, which looks a lot like a kind of roller coaster if you frame it a certain way. And we have the hero's journey, the story circles, all these things which you don't really have to pay that much attention to. These are all just, somebody's asking, can I go back to the first page? Back to the first page of the whole slideshow, or just of this section here? You mean the Vonnegut slides, perhaps? We can, okay, sure. So we can also just link the slideshow, and you can access this and view these on your own if you would like. Yeah, we'll post them, don't worry. Okay, So let's keep going. You don't really have to memorize any of these. The point is you should just kind of take what you want from what you're learning here and incorporate that into your own method, and take what works and don't use what doesn't work, but this is how I suggest doing it, and the way that I will best be able to help you as someone who has done this a lot. Okay, so let's look at my usual structure for features. This is what I personally use for most genres that I'm doing, because I focus on action and horror and thriller films, and those really thrive in the kind of 90-page-ish range. An action film that's only 90 pages is a very attractive sort of property, because that just automatically looks cheaper. Less action scenes means less money spent, and just nailing something on the dot right at 90 pages is just oddly satisfying for me, and I really like to do that with both horror and thriller, because that you don't want to drag those out way too long usually. They sort of thrive with that, grabbing someone's attention and holding it and building that tension for just the right amount of time, and then leaving them spooked, and you can't drag it out too long, or else you'll lose a bit of the scare factor to some extent. But there's always exceptions to that. I'm sure, The Shining or Hereditary or whatever are 2 hours plus. So I mean to say that I usually aim for 90 pages, so you can look at where I sort of put these different structural beats that we're going to talk about in just a moment. So I think we just talked about acts 1, 2, and 3 as the once upon a time there was a, and then act 2 is one day she had to do this. Act 3 is everything seemed on the verge of failing, at which point she remembered, I should always I should never have left home. Whatever the lesson was of the story, then she sort of becomes the synthesized version of herself from Act 1, the value she always had in Act 1 with the value she learned in Act 2, and then moves into our finale. So you can look at a couple of these are, abbreviated in this slide here. But we'll go over these in just a second, but this should just give you the sense of the kind of ratio apart that these things should be happening. If you're writing 120-page movies, then you're going to have to stretch a couple of these out and just calculate a little bit. If your midpoint is right in the middle, then you're writing 120 pages, then that would be around page 60 instead. So, again, don't worry if this seems right now you're like, this is going to make my script feel too formulaic. I promise it's not. You can do some really weird, crazy stuff within just regular 3-act structure. I promise you. Okay, so let's look at what is an outline. This is a blueprint for structuring the story of your entire movie that's going to provide an overview of the story beats and the scenes, which we've talked about both. Before you start writing the script in screenplay format, which we won't go to pages, which is what it's called. So remember that. Go to pages means start actually formatting properly. We don't go to pages until 4 weeks in. So there's many different styles and methods of outlining, and we're just going to focus on my really kind of step-by-step, simple procedural style that I've been using for many years and teaching for a long time too. So let's go to a discussion really quick. Have you outlined scripts before? What was your process? Why do we even bother creating an outline or logline? And feel free to either use the chat or unmute. Joe says to act as guideposts for writing pages. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. If we don't know where we're actually going, it's easy to either get paralyzed by choice. I see a lot happens to writers a lot. They lose the will to kind of keep forging ahead through the script because they get so hung up on I could do all these other things, and if you don't have those guideposts nailed down in place, then it can be easy to sort of just get lost in the woods. Maria says to keep me from getting lost in the plot. Yes, exactly. That sort of, snowstorm that's we're going to have to use these guideposts to get through. It can be easy to drift off and be like, I just don't know what to do next, or I don't know what I've been leading up to. What have I been foreshadowing exactly? To avoid all those problems, we just need to have plot moments solidly nailed down as early as we can. So, logline is the entire story distilled down to a sentence or two. We say the entire story, it doesn't have to include the ending, but this is basically like a pitch for the story, and having that pitch nailed down is going to also just act as like, but just by having it, you're going to know what a bunch of your structural beats will be from the very start, which is a nice hack that you can use while sort of structuring. And you should be able to use this to tell if your story is staying on course. If it starts to describe a completely different logline, then you may have to change the logline, or you may have to change the story to like accommodate it. So remember, we want to imply visual action, and not just movies that are going to be about people sitting around thinking about stuff or just discussing stuff or deciding stuff, because like we can't really see inside characters' heads as well as we could in a novel. It's not to say that you can't do crazy, trippy Spike Jonze stuff where you show inside what's happening inside people's brains and stuff. But just keep in mind, you got to be more careful and deliberate about how you make those choices. So you want to imply that a majority of the action that we're watching is going to be visual. There's going to be an inciting incident that kicks the story off. We want to know who is the main protagonist and what do they want, so kind of their Act 2 goal, if we're keeping in mind that Act 2 is basically the movie, right? What is in their way? What's the Act 2 obstacle, which is almost always going to be an antagonist of some kind. There are occasional stories where there is not an antagonist. Somebody name a story for me that does not have any antagonist at all. Joe says, To Build a Fire by Jack London. I am not familiar with that. Can you summarize for us? Are you there, Joe? You're on mute, just so you know. He says his mic is not working. No worries. You can type it out for us. So this is a story with no antagonist, no sort of villain. Can you think of a movie that has no villain, and why would that work?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. To Build a Fire is just a short story by Jack London about a man and his dog just wandering through the Alaskan wilderness for like the late 19th century. And it's just like this man just slowly freezing to death due to his hubris.
Okay, but this is not a movie, right? This is a book?
No, it's not. Well, I know there's been a movie made of it because I've seen the movie made of it.
Oh, there is a movie of it. Okay. So, yeah, in that case, like some folks in the chat are saying, nature can sort of be the antagonist, I guess, in a case like that. You're right, there's no sort of like human antagonist, though. That's what you're saying. There's not like a personified one.
Yeah, it's literally just this man trying to get to a fort, and every time he tries to get warmer as the temperature drops, he messes up somehow.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So survival thrillers are the kind of story where the antagonist can be sort of more like a situation or like circumstances or the weather or nature itself. Man versus nature stories are sort of very classical. Oh, Nacho says you're having trouble hearing me. Are you still? Should I disconnect then reconnect, perhaps? Or is it okay? Anybody?
I hear you.
That sounds a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just moved it a little closer. Okay, well, let me know if that happens again. Anyway, so what I was just asking about stories without antagonists, just so that we know how important it is. What is in the main character's way? Like, I'm having trouble even thinking of how to phrase good log lines without some sense of what the main character is up against. So that sort of like obstacle, the sense of obstacle, motivation, stakes, and urgency coming up against a worthy obstacle is such an important part of a logline. Pete says being there. I'm not sure what being there is either. Can you enlighten us, Pete?
It was a movie with Peter Sellers, and he plays this kind of idiot groundskeeper in the White House. And he's not really an antagonist, but as the story unfolds, the president starts to realize that he's kind of a idiot savant, and he solves all these problems. I don't know if there's an antagonist, actually. There might be a bad guy in the film. I'm not sure.
Interesting. Okay, so it's sort of more just like a bunch of... It's like a bunch of episodic sort of situations.
Yeah. It's just humor, though. It's it's lighthearted and it's funny. But
I see. Okay. Yeah, no, I can... There's a certain genre of very, very light comedy that doesn't even really have a significant antagonist. I'm not sure... do the Mr. Bean movies have antagonists? I think Mr. Bean is his own antagonist, isn't he?
Yeah, maybe.
Isn't he always the one who sort of self-sabotages every situation? Or is there someone directly opposing Mr. Bean?
Well, I think he did Johnny Danger or something. I don't know. He's done a few movies where he stretches out a little bit, but...
Oh, Johnny English? Yeah, he's a spy in that one, though.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's Mr. Bean. But he's a similar sort of guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But generally, it's hard to find any movies like what you're saying. That's pretty hard.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very important to have a strong kind of oppositional, antagonistic force of some kind. And also just the sense of ticking clock, or what bad thing will occur if the characters do not succeed at their goal. Here's a question. Would the normal people of society be the antagonist, or order itself for Mr. Bean? That's a good question. That's a kind of a philosophical question at this point. Is it society's fault is society the antagonist for not accommodating Mr. Bean's strangeness? Or is Mr. Bean the antagonist for not conforming to society's rules? Right? Sort of, yeah. Someone's got to write like a pamphlet on this or something. Joe says maybe a slice of life movie like My Dinner with Andre or Before Sunrise. Yeah, I think those would probably count as movies that don't really have traditional antagonists, but or maybe just the characters are each other's antagonists because the antagonists' forces are like their problems that cause them to not really be together. I don't really know. I haven't seen those, and I'm not super into that genre, so I'm like, I can't even possibly think of what the conflict could be. But people love them, so there's got to be something there. Okay, here's the logline template. Look at this, and I would write this down if you are new here. If you aren't new here, and you've been here a long time, you're sick to death of this, so you don't need to write this down. But let's look at this. So after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before / in order to stakes or ticking clock. Any terms on this that you are unfamiliar with or would like to hear more about?
Knock it off!
Ooh, I think we're getting someone's mic sounds. Okay, if everyone could just make sure their mic is muted. Thank you. Okay, so everyone can decipher the language in this logline template. It's not that it's hard to figure out, but you get the idea. The inciting incident is the catalyst for the story. So that is the event that sets the story into motion. It's the first domino to fall. We want to have the adjective should be chosen carefully to highlight what either makes your main character, what is a trait that they will be sort of struggling with or trying to overcome in the story, something that will make this a particularly difficult journey for them, or it could be something that makes them relate personally to the events of the story. So if, for instance, I don't know, I'm going to give you some terrible cliched example, but it's like if it's a movie about it's set during Prohibition and it's about a serial killer going around killing people with poisoned alcohol, and your main character might want to describe them as an alcoholic detective gets involved with a case of an alcohol poisoner. It's like, oh, okay, I can see why this would challenge his recovery from his own problems, and I can see why that would be something he would be struggling with throughout the story that would be complicating his journey and making it steeper climb uphill. Yeah, obviously it's a cliched kind of crappy example because, we've seen a billion alcoholic detectives a billion times, right? But you get the idea of why we chose that term alcoholic and why we chose the term detective. When remember, you can describe people in like many different kind of ways, and you always want to in a logline describe them in such a way as it relates to the events in the that like makes it click together like the wonderful little gears and Lego pieces or whatever of just this little machine that you're creating. So like obviously if you have a character that is a father, a construction worker, and a let's say he's in his midlife crisis, you could describe him as any of those three things in the logline, couldn't you? But so you want to pick the thing that's most relevant for that story, right? So if it's going to be a story about a guy who has to learn how to work on a solar power plantation, but before he's, like a heavy oil refinery worker, then okay, we'd want to describe him as, a stubborn oil refinery worker is forced to work on an alternative energy farm. Not just as he's having trouble hearing me again. I don't know why. He says, now we can hear great. Cool. Yep, that just happens sometimes. Could I repeat? Where did you lose me? Can you still hear me okay? Now it's really quiet. Maybe... Oh, not just says sounds perfect. Okay, cool. Morgana says goes in and out. Alright, I'm gonna unplug my mic and plug it back in and hope that fixes something. Just give me a moment. Okay, does that work? Someone says, yes, much better. Okay, great. It might have been trying to use the webcam audio before, I suspect. Alright, here's the slideshow back up. What was the wonderful... I was on such a roll, too. So we there's a lot of different ways that you can refer to a person in a logline, right? Okay, so if somebody is a father, a construction worker, and let's say, I don't know, a dyed-in-the-wool Republican right-winger, then you could reasonably call them any of those three things in terms of the logline itself, right? So you have to look at what is the journey that this character is making, and how am I able to highlight that journey is going to be particularly challenging and interesting for them to do. So if it's about a guy that has to he ends up having to work on a solar plant, like a wind refinery, whatever, alternative energy farm, then you might say, a construction worker ends up having to work on a wind refinery farm. And it's like, I can see the journey that they would have to then make. You have to learn the new skills that are, he has to switch over from his kind of background in oil refinery or coal digging or whatever to working on an alternative energy farm. So you might pick that. Or let's say it's about the same guy who, I don't know, an alternative energy entrepreneur starts dating his daughter. Then you might describe him as like, a right-wing father in rural Alabama starts, his daughter is visited. That sounds like almost like Mr. Scrooge. She comes home with her new boyfriend, who is the CEO of a soy factory or whatever. Then, see how framing him as a father in that case kind of draws into question, that shows his relationship to what's going on, and that shows why this character will have a particularly interesting or relevant journey when it comes to this event that's occurring. So that's how you should kind of choose how to describe your main character. You can describe almost anyone in many different terms, but if you had to just pick one noun to use to describe them, then make sure it's one that highlights their relationship to what's going on and shows that this person will have a unique and fun and interesting journey in this situation, because movies are all about one situation that could only ever happen in one specific way. It's not about a bunch of repeatable situations in an interesting story world. That's what TV is for, or what comic books are for. A movie is about one situation that could only have played out like this. Questions about the logline format? And if I were you, I would recommend opening a sketchbook. Go into your Google Docs, make a blank new sketchbook with your movie name, and just write name of the movie sketchbook. And to start sketching out different log lines that you have, that you're getting ready that you want to test in this class, and that you want to get feedback on. If you're trying to decide between multiple, we can help you today. Pick the one that we think is most developed or that is most interesting. You can get feedback from me and also from the rest of the students here. Feel free to also, you should get used to sharing your work with both me and with the group and with just certain closed circles. Obviously, we're not going to post anyone's work online. No one's going to steal anything of yours. But you should get used to sharing with the group at early stages at all times, especially if you want to work in TV, in which case you have to share absolutely embryonic ideas to collaborate with a room and just perform the kind of teamwork that's so necessary in screenwriting. It's so collaborative. So don't get too hitched to your ideas. Don't be too attached to your ideas. Obviously no one's going to be that's dumb, but even if they did, you should still not have, you should get to the point where you would not mind, even if someone were so annoying as to do that. So yeah, we're untethering from our ideas and we're learning how to write movies. Let's start working on those. So please start writing. I'll give you 30 seconds to come up with some stuff for the logline. All the logline ideas you have. And in these 30 or so seconds, I will take any questions that occur to you. Joe asks, should we add comps too? Yes, you can add comps if you want. You do not have to. You should at least have the genre, though. And title if you've got it. Okay, let's keep going. And talk a little about the sketchbook, and feel free to keep working on your loglines. But remember, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is just going to be a place to collect your notes and ideas and sketches, kind of like a collage of those ideas as you develop your story. You're going to flesh out your characters or maybe possible themes, come up with some Act 2 scenes or set pieces. Remember the movie is almost all encapsulated in Act 2, so we want to make Act 2 be the focus of all the fun scenes that you thought of for the trailer. Or maybe for the poster, things like that. You want to brainstorm possible endings, because the ending is going to be the thing that we are left with when someone leaves the theater and goes home. So important. Any lines of dialogue, any things pertaining to research of the setting of the story world. Again, we say probably don't do either time travel or historical or true stories, because in just the amount of time that you have, it will be difficult to do the required research for that kind of work. But just include photos, drawings, and anything else that generally inspires you. So yeah, this is how you're going to create that sketchbook. Just go to Google Docs, make a new document, and call it title sketchbook. And you're going to include your title at the top if you have it, or just idea for title, or you can say untitled, whatever. Genre. So try to not pick more than 2 things. This is either going to be, action or an action comedy. That's the thing. Don't try to do action, comedy, western, horror, romance. Don't stack thing after thing after thing. Just pick the 2 main tones of it and boil it down to those. Logline is one single sentence that expresses the plot in the always. You can start with this template that we gave you, and as long as you're sort of answering those general questions, then it's going to be okay, even if it doesn't fit that template at the end of ultimately. So comps are going to be other movies that you can compare this to in terms of tone or the action that we're watching, the world of one in the tone of the other, that kind of stuff. So Like, it's good to have 2 comps on hand if you're like, this is sort of, Predator meets Die Hard. Then we know it's going to be about, we might have a kind of violent R-rated action tone and be about one lone, probably alien or sci-fi type character that's fighting a bunch of, enemy bad guys. Lots of gore and explosions and laser guns in that one, probably. So, like, that's just giving us the general sense of what that movie's like. So we want to start with the title, genre, and logline in the chat. If you're trying to choose between multiple ideas, post them all. And now we're going to take a look. So go ahead and scroll down to the free Bootcamp class chat on the left side of the Discord window. By clicking on that, you can type and send it to us, and we can give you some feedback. I will also be asking everyone to unmute and to get used to reading out loud and speaking on the mic. So you'll be asked to read your logline out loud and answer questions about it to make these as strong as they can be. Make sure we can start to assess story problems even now. All right, so I'll be calling on people. Make sure let's please keep our mics muted until then. So thank you for sharing these so far. Let's get at least 1 or 2 more before we start going through. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Pete. Thank you, Morgana. Thanks, Joe. All right, let's start with a few of these. Recently, a friend of mine gave me a Star Wars action figure from the 90s, and I gave it a little gun, and now it sits on the edge of my desk, and when I have writing I'm supposed to be doing, I pulled up the gun like this to point at myself to remind myself to get back to work. So that's just a nice little reminder that I would recommend having a little man threaten you into getting your work done. If you're struggling to accomplish your daily writing task, threaten yourself with a cute little death. Okay, let's look at some log lines in the chat. We will start with Maria. Spy romance. We don't have a title yet. Go ahead and read this out for us.
The logline?
Yep, go ahead.
After deciding to come out of retirement, a single mom turned secret agent struggles against a spy from a rival agency in order to save a foreign prime minister from an assassination attempt.
All right. Thanks for this. A single mom turned secret agent struggles against a spy from a rival agency in order to save a prime minister from an assassination attempt. Okay, so I guess a couple thoughts here. The phrase deciding to is always kind of a red flag for me because it implies that someone is just doing something with no real clear motivation or urgency to it. So if there's something that actually forces her to kind of come out of retirement, I would try to emphasize that. If in thriller kind of movies like this, which you do say this is an action comedy, try to find that sense of urgency. I guess if she was previously a secret agent, she's not really a single mom turned secret agent, is she? Isn't she more like a secret agent turned single mom turned secret agent, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess it just doesn't. I can still see that working in that we see that in movies like The Long Kiss Goodnight, which is a great sort of Shane Black spy thriller kind of like this. But I guess beyond just the mechanics of the first sentence and the inciting incident that we're talking about, which I would just try to find a clearer inciting incident that's more kind of urgent and exciting and implies that your main character is doing this for a reason that is motivated and is like something that we can really root for, right?
Yeah.
And then once we have that in place, then I think that just trying to save a prime minister from being assassinated is kind of just like a conflict that we've seen in it's almost just like a description of the genre. You see what I'm like? This is almost like it's like a very archetypical kind of spy kind of story. So if there's something you can do to bring out the uniqueness of that more, I would try for it. So is this the Like, is there something unique and interesting about this prime minister, or is there an interesting team up that your main character will have to do in order to take this villain down? Or like, what's this? Like, spy thrillers have great villains, right? Think of like Bond villains. They're very memorable. They're almost like the key. They're almost like the motivating force behind the whole movie, aren't they? And they're so iconic. So like, if you have a villain, I would try to bring them to the forefront a little bit more, rather than just laying out the stakes in these sort of like, it's like, yeah, they're going to be stopping an assassination, sure, but what's the actually interesting part of this conflict? Does that make sense?
Yeah. She doesn't know that she's that she's not the only I sent to protect the prime minister. Her rival was sent for the same mission, and she doesn't know it.
Okay, so and the she develops the romance with this other guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're part of just rival agencies that are competing with each other for what reason?
Both their agencies won't want to get the credit for protecting this one person.
Oh, okay. So is the guy that she is up against, is he like the best one that they have, basically? So
yes.
Only one of them can win?
Yes.
Okay, these are just things that I might sort of bring to the forefront a little bit, because there's a little more spice there, you see what I mean? I would try to bring that to the forefront, like, if this is going to be a competition between her and the best spy at this other agency, whom she's sort of dangerously falling in love with, then I find that conflict to be more fascinating than, oh, they're just trying to stop a guy from being assassinated. Do you see what I mean? Like, sort of, if the romance is the hook, then we want to know what is making these people have to go head to head. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Maria. Any questions from you?
No.
All right, thanks so much. Let's keep on going. Pete, give us house basement.
Okay, house basement, comedy horror. When a family's new house's basement starts making people disappear, a ho-hum American family decides to capitalize on the situation until everything starts to go horribly wrong.
Okay. So I guess that I am intrigued by this, but I will say an American family is not a main character, and we need a main character. So you gotta hinge this around one person. Whose story is this? Is this the dad's story? Is this the mom's story? Is this one of the kids' stories? It's like a very different movie, depending on whom you hinge it around. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, I guess.
If this is one of the kids' stories, I could see this being sort of like a wicked, nasty little, almost like Goosebumps kind of tone story about the kids who find this basement that basically eats people. They start using it to get rid of people they don't like, and then it pulls the parents into the sort of, to trying to keep their secret perhaps, or they end up being forced to find out where exactly this dark, horrible basement leads, or something like that. If this is one of the parent stories, I could see this more about them killing people in the neighborhood with their basement, or like, I don't know. You see how there's like a lot of different ways you could take it depending on whose story it is?
Yeah, I was thinking that the mother is the main person who goes in the basement, so she's kind of like the victim. And then the family capitalizes on the fact that they find her again, and they start taking advantage of the situation, you know. So
Wait, she's the victim. What do you mean?
Well, the mother goes in the basement, and she's the first person to disappear, and then they find her like 2 weeks later, and she has no idea what happened.
Oh, so it teleports them? It doesn't, like, eat them?
Yeah, it's like another dimension, so they just disappear. Yeah, like teleporting or whatever kind of travel that is, I'm not sure.
Oh, how would they take advantage of this situation?
Well, it happens a couple times, and they start to sell tickets to the neighborhood, and they view it kind of as a ride or like a experience.
Okay.
So it's comedy too. It's not, it's a comedy slash thriller horror.
Right. But I'm just saying, you've seen Being John Malkovich, right?
Yeah.
So, but in that movie, when they start selling tickets to this tunnel that leads into John Malkovich's brain, it has this kind of wish fulfillment aspect of I get to be John Malkovich for a little bit first. So for that one, that makes more sense to me. But this, I'm like, would they pay money just to get zapped out of existence for a while, then reappear somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, in my head, I don't know if
You're saying you would do that?
No, that's part of the joke. It's like I think the people in the town are not that smart or something. Like it's a little like Jackass, kind of. Like it's like they know they're gonna be okay. They just want to go through this experience.
Okay, so for like some kind of like Jackass, I could maybe see them doing this if they thought it had some kind of religious significance.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, it might be tied to some kind of belief that this town has. Maybe they're very Christian, or that's possible.
Okay, I'm struggling to see the conflict in this. What's the conflict here? What's horribly wrong?
Oh, they do it a bunch of times, and everybody's having a good time. But then it turns out that everybody that went through the basement turns into a werewolf type bear animal and starts killing everybody.
Oh.
So that's the real twist.
That is quite a twist.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing, it's supposed to build up to that, and that's really the story.
Are there like clues foreshadowing the werebear thing?
Maybe, yeah. I'm thinking of it's kind of taken off from American Werewolf in London. I don't know how much I would give the clue. I definitely would give some clues, definitely, to create the mood. I wouldn't just make it random.
Okay. It sounds a little random to me currently, but maybe you have some great setup for it, or some kind of nice way to forecast it, or make it feel all coherent and not just like you're kind of an improv sketch that just goes crazy.
Yeah, no. Right now, it's more like an improv sketch. It's the state that it's in. I'm hoping that I can get it like to a real idea and really flesh it out. Make it. Yeah. So this is definitely the beginning.
All right.
Yeah, a little like Poltergeist. Yeah, like definitely part like that scene in Poltergeist with the TV.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just wondering. So if this is gonna be a horror comedy, you have the structure of a horror movie basically, right? So I would just make sure that your actual threat or monster doesn't appear way too late, would be the only concern that I would have. Right now, it sounds like you're saying it would be maybe not even until the midpoint.
Yeah, I could make the beginning happen faster. It doesn't have to be drawn out so it's boring. You know what I mean?
I would have the monsters happen no more than page 25. And we want to normally start with a scary scene, too. So just be thinking of ways that we can do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's also like trying to... some of these like slow-moving thriller movies, I kind of wanted to have a lot of that in it for quite a bit before it goes nuts.
Okay.
But that I don't know. I'll take all the input. Obviously, it's really appreciated. So whatever I can get, I'll take it.
Sure. Any questions? No questions? Okay. Let's keep going. We have many more to do. And we're just going to go straight down in the order list. So check where you are in the queue. Morgana, Joe, Saturn, Tara. That is going to be the list. If you want to revise something and put it into the queue after that, you can. Morgana, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's called Unpaid Intern, and Rosie's a college graduate who is struggling to start her career. When her new politician boss turns out to be a sexist jerk, she schemes revenge by helping another former disgruntled intern beat him in the primary election.
All right, thanks for this. So let me read this again. So a college graduate and her new politician boss. Wait, so is she struggling to start her career, or does she have a new boss?
She's an intern. I should have added that.
Okay.
Like it's kind of like she doesn't want to be an intern. You know what I mean? Because she's graduated.
Okay, I think we can cut your first sentence then. In this case, we could just say when a new intern, when a naive new intern's politician boss turns out to be a jerk, she schemes revenge by helping another former disgruntled intern beat him in the primary election. Is this an intern that works for the opposite party?
No.
Then
It's like
go ahead.
She used to be like, she was another intern for the same guy. That he was like an asshole to her too.
Oh, I see.
So they're teaming up.
So she's helping a former intern.
Yeah, like a campaign manager.
I see. Secretly on the side, she's helping him.
Yeah.
So she's like she's like a mole, basically.
No, the guy kind of she's not a mole, she flat out quits, and she just decides, I'm gonna help her win and convince her to win or run, and that's what she does. She helps the other, the ex-intern beat him.
And why is she able to do what special skills does this unpaid intern have that would allow her to do that?
Just that, this guy is the type of guy who does not try, and thinks that he has everything given to him, and he doesn't take this seriously. He thinks it's like a Mickey Mouse type operation, and they're actually working hard, knocking doors, building an operation from the ground up. So it's kind of like an establishment versus underground type thing.
I guess I just have I have trouble with a movie where you describe the villain as not really trying. You know what I mean? That just makes it seem like the conflict here is not quite high enough.
What I mean is like they're going up against like the whole system. So like he has the media behind him. He has the party behind him. He has money behind him. Mm-hmm. And he's like using all of that to his advantage. What I mean by not trying is that he does try, but at first he doesn't take it seriously. But eventually he does try. I should have made that clear.
Okay. So at what point does she quit her job as the intern?
About 25 pages.
Then I think that it seems like you're torpedoing your own premise a little bit to me. If the movie's called Unpaid Intern, and I was following along, and I was like, wow, this is a fantastic high concept premise. Until you're saying, I guess that it's not quite clicking as much for me now that you're saying that.
Well, not true.
Go ahead.
I've actually written it. I wanted to, because I know it's like a comedy, so I really don't want it to be. I tried to write it. I thought it was going too long, and so it might be like around 40 pages, but I really want to cut it because I know comedies are not supposed to be more than 90, 95 pages. Or obviously there's drama in this, but you know what I mean? So I want it to be quick because I know maybe I should just ignore that for now because it's first draft. But as it's going right now, it's going to happen around 40 pages, but obviously I don't want this to go 130 minutes or something like that. Although maybe I'm wrong and you're right in that the structure is just going to work out.
So you're saying you've written a draft of this before?
Yeah.
You have? Okay, so this is not a brand new feature. This is a rewrite?
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually have a separate class for rewrites. The feature course is for brand new feature ideas. So, or maybe you could also rewrite something if you're starting from square zero, if you're totally starting from the blank page. Is that what you're saying you want to do, or are you?
Yeah, that's what I'm pretty much doing.
Oh, you were okay. So you're okay just scrapping everything and starting over?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my instinct upon hearing this, I will just tell you, is that I was super on board when I misunderstood what the story was. And I misunderstood the story to be that there's an intern who works for a politician. She hates him and finds out he's an awful jerk. So then she schemes revenge by helping either someone else in within her party, or a disgruntled member of a disgruntled former member of the team She's helping that person beat her boss secretly on the sly while continuing to work for this guy. And then I was like, oh, I can totally see all the conflict. I can totally see what the hook is. I can see that as the election gets closer, she's going to get closer and closer to getting caught. And the closer that, and like the more that this scheme ramps up in intensity, the more that we're going to have like a sort of interesting, possibly romantic comedy antics with this other person who she's having to like feed information to win. And if you're saying that she actually quits being an intern about halfway through or less, then it feels like you have the wrong sort of hook or the way into me. Calling it unpaid intern at that point is almost like besides the point. And if it's just like if that's just her normal, like we don't call Star Wars Luke the farmer, do we? I mean, like that's only what they're doing in the first act. We want to call someone what they end up like becoming, not what they start as, right? Am I crazy?
No, that makes sense. I just thought it was a cool title, to be honest.
It is a cool title.
For it.
No, that's why why I'm like, that's such a cool title and such an interesting ground for a high concept story that I think that maybe you should consider adjusting the story to sort of molding around what it could kind of be. I don't know. You've obviously taken a shot at it, and that's fine. And like, I'm not saying that you have to change any one individual thing of it, though you should, of course, be open to, just sort of starting fresh. But I will give you the benefit, at least, of saying that when I was reading this, I was like, wow, that's an awesome high concept story. Oh, wait, that one thing is off? Now it's almost like murkier. It's murkier to me now. So I guess just try to find like a specific hook to, or like, why would this intern teaming up with this other person to take down her former boss, why would that be a particularly difficult or interesting job? Why does she have some special set of skills that allow her, I sound like Liam Neeson, some special set of skills that will allow her to do that in some fascinating or particularly competent or skillful way? Or like, why are we watching? I mean, you might as well say the former gardener of a politician finds out he's a jerk and teams up with someone else, someone running against him to help him to help defeat him in the primary, right? Like, what's connecting those elements? That's what I'm looking for. I hope that's helpful. I realize I just said a million things.
Oh yeah, it definitely works. I definitely get what you're saying. I guess I'm looking at it as like a overall David versus Goliath. That's generally the theme, and like friendship of these two people is kind of also a theme. But yeah, I definitely get what you're saying.
Okay, so yeah, maybe just kind of clarify the central conflict or the central hook a little bit, and try to a little bit of a sense of urgency is always helpful. Motivation, stakes, and urgency. If your main character has already quit her job, then I'm like, what are the stakes for her? If she doesn't get this guy beaten in the primary, what will happen? She'll just continue to be thinking he's a jerk. You see what I mean? Like, find something that really your main character would stand to lose or that matters to them.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I'm good.
All right. Thank you for bringing this. Let's go to Joe.
I know you and Nacho have gone over a few times.
We're still hunting
current
vampires
title
in Kenya? No, wait. Where
yes.
are we now?
No, it's
we're
still Kenya.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just changed the title. Logline. An expat South Vietnamese veteran hunts a nomadic vampire cult across 1980s Kenya. But what was supposed to be a straightforward eradication job gets complicated when the group, recently swept up in and catalyzing a local outbreak of Ebola hemorrhagic fever, infects him with the disease.
All right, thank you for this. Yeah, I remember looking at this a couple times before. Very unique setting. I like a lot about this. There's a lot of words here.
Yeah, I do have a more condensed version.
Go ahead.
As well, that Nacho and I talked about. You want me to post it in the chat as well?
Go ahead.
Okay. This one is an expat South Vietnamese veteran hunts a nomadic vampire cult across 1980s Kenya and Uganda during an Ebola outbreak.
This one's closer, but help me understand some things. What is a South Vietnamese veteran? A veteran of what? What war?
Oh, he's a Vietnam.
But he himself is Vietnamese? Or he is a veteran?
Yes.
Wait, what? Help me out.
He
Your main
is
character is ethnically Vietnamese.
Yes.
Is he an American citizen?
That part, I'm still juggling. Basic gist is whether or not he's an American citizen or actually from, like, living in South Vietnam, his heritage is like a Southern Vietnamese.
Oh. Tifa says, may I interject? Go ahead, Tifa.
Yeah, so the South Vietnamese, I mean, it's also the name of the regime, the government that collaborated with the U.S. government. So when when people who like have studied the Vietnam War, when they're just saying South Vietnamese, people tend to know like, oh, it's the shorthand. It doesn't mean like someone from the south of Vietnam in general way. It means like someone who was participating in the Vietnam War on the southern government side while Vietnam was split in two.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful context. I will say I don't see how this particular war or the fact that they are from this war is related to the fact that we're now in Uganda during an Ebola outbreak, and I think you're just going to confuse people by already listing out the this character's ethnicity, or which is making me wonder, like, are they from Vietnam? Are you saying they were on the American side or the Viet Cong side during Vietnam? Or are you saying this was a Vietnamese American citizen who was in the war fighting against the Vietnamese? I think we just need to know this is a veteran, right?
Yeah. That was just like more stuff with his heritage will definitely be explored in like the second half of Act 2.
Okay, so Nacho says that he's a mercenary. Is that more accurate? Like a mercenary monster hunter, kind of?
I would say that's accurate since the war.
Okay. That sounds right. Or a bounty hunter, you know. A mercenary hunts a nomadic cult of vampires across 1980s Kenya during an Ebola outbreak. Ooh, that's spicy. Well done. If you can just give us one adjective for the mercenary, something ideally kind of like a trait of his that sounds like it will be particularly interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Try to find that. I'm thinking like a werewolf mercenary. I would try to find something interesting in his personality, or something that links him to this particular cult. Like, was it the cult that raised him? Something like that, if that is what attaches him to it. Or gotta find something. Yeah, alcoholic. It's the easiest trait ever. Use that. Thanks, Don. Okay.
I'll give that some thought.
Questions? Any questions?
Germaphobe mercenary. That would be an interesting dilemma for him in this situation.
He only uses really long range guns, so he doesn't get any yucky blood on him.
I'm wondering, so if the important part of the story, the important emphasis of the story is that this veteran presumably is struggling with feelings of like, oh, have I betrayed my country? Have I betrayed my heritage by doing what I did? And this is a sort of like a redemption arc. Then maybe the logline doesn't have to talk about the geopolitics. The logline could just focus on presenting that aspect. That's just a thought I have.
Okay. Yeah, I see that.
Thank you.
The main idea I have with the heritage in talking like the Vietnam War is because in the second half of Act 2, he'll get infected, and he'll start like basically becoming encephalitic, and he'll start like confusing his presence with like his service in Vietnam when he became a vampire hunter to begin with.
is there a main villain of this vampire cult gang that we need to know about?
Yeah, the cult leader. He's like a pretty much a Colonel Kurtz figure. That's how I ended up finding my way into having Apocalypse Now as one of the comps.
But does our main character have some kind of relationship with that character or something like that that would spice up the logline?
Oh, but yeah, like the inciting incident would be he's hired by like basically a well he's basically hired by other vampires trying to act anonymously, like, hey, this our fellow vampire, like, on this council, he's threatening the masquerade, so can you go kill him? He's living in Africa as of now.
Okay, so you're saying no, in fact, he has no connection to this. He's just hired to go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might want to just think about that and how I understand how, there's whole genres that do hinge around the main character is hired to do this job, and I understand that, like, that's a bit better just how some characters work. But for a movie, it's going to be stronger usually to have some kind of interesting personal connection between the characters, because there's no reason really not to. For a TV show or for a book series or something, it could be a little nicer to have that you're hired for this job kind of thing. But if you can possibly think of a way that, like, even look at something like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, don't they have it make it so that his family was slaughtered by vampires or whatever in that? So you can see why
if I recall
do
that movie correctly.
Yeah, something like that. So just consider that adds so much stakes and urgency if it's not just like, what's stopping your main character from leaving? Well, he doesn't want to leave a job unfinished, I guess. It just feels a little kind of weak. Is it his home village? Is it a place where his ancestors are from? Is it something?
No, his ancestors are from Vietnam.
Right, which is why I guess I'm asking: does it have to be that way, or could it be someone who fought in what country is this that he's in now?
Oh, it's going to take place like across both Kenya and Uganda, like on the northern shores of Lake Victoria.
Right. Okay. So I was just thinking if there's no reason it can't be someone who fought in a war in this region instead. Then it would give them more personal connection to what's going on. It would be like, oh, okay, maybe they have to even return home to fight this vampire that is now threatening their homeland. Something that just brings this closer to heart, rather than you were just hired to do this job. So that's my recommendation for you. You don't have to do that, and many good stories have been told of someone hired to solve a crime or whatever, but just something to think about.
I understand.
Thanks, Joe. Any last questions?
Thank you.
No final questions? Okay. Let's maybe do a little more about loglines. I'm going to be right back in just 1 second. Okay, let's talk more about log lines before we'll still get to the other ones that we got today. But first, I just want to glance at some of these. Here we go. Okay, so we have what readers are looking for in log lines. So we want to remember stakes that seem like they're going to be big, so as big as they can be for that genre. Movies are all about you find the conflict and you mine as many possible games from the center of it, and you make sure that you're escalating it as high as it possibly can kind of go for within the parameters and walls of the world that you're playing in. So we want stakes that are going to be about life and death. In some genres, it's got to be life and death, or else you better have something way better, especially in action and horror. If your stakes are not life and death, you better have like an alternative that is more exciting or more scary. Love, sex, friendship, revenge, and we want log lines that sort of imply this, not just the motivation or the stakes for these stories, but also the size of that story, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be way too big, implying a kind of 3-hour epic or a miniseries, or we don't want anything to seem sort of episodic at all, where it's going to be like a setup for a series of situations, or somebody starting a new job or a business that does this, or like it's going to be that kind of thing again and again and again. We want to, again, just watch one trajectory of events that could have only happened in one specific way, one specific time. So we want movies that will be visual and about people doing stuff. So not stories that will be about characters sitting around and just talking about stuff. We want to make sure that the primary action is going to be tracked through tangible goals, which is so important. And there should almost never ever be a time where we are wondering what your main character is doing or what their intention is in a specific scene. So, remember, look at video games nowadays and how a lot of them have this kind of big arrow at the top that tells you exactly where to go to your next objective. Look at a BioShock game, or the Call of Duty games I think have this now, or the Dead Space games, which do this really well, where you press a button and your character holds out his hand and a laser kind of points you in the direction of your next objective, so you literally never don't know where your main character is going. You can look at those as kind of, you either like them or you don't, but they're there for a reason. It's because the audience has been trained over time to want to know what the main character is kind of up to at all times. And so unless we know what tangible goal the main character is moving towards sequentially, one after another, with, remember, an escalating sense of urgency and danger, and where all the sort of plot bombs that we're setting off explode in suitably sequential, a sequentially increasing pyramid. We're upping the stakes, we're upping the danger through the entire script. And also, we need to know what happens if the protagonist fails, or what do they stand to lose, what cost do they stand to have exacted upon them, what is the antagonist, and what is the antagonist going to what is their threat that they sort of pose. We also just want to make sure the main character seems entirely suited to that story. So remember, we can describe a person in many different ways, so we want to do so in such a way that implies the internal journey that they will be making, the one that's going to helix and interweave and intertwine with that external journey, which is going to be the thing that we can define as just their simple goal. And you're in rocky territory, and I hear this even for some very experienced students sometimes. I'll be like, what is your main character trying to do in this story? And they'll be like, take Lord of the Rings. They'll be like, Frodo is trying to become the best version of himself and accept the weight of the responsibility and the burden of the consequences of his choices, and become the person that ultimately he truly needs to be. And I'm like, okay, great, but what is he trying to do? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, he's trying to throw a ring in a volcano, though, right? That's the difference between internal and external journey. Your external journey should be something that can be summed up with just one sentence, almost always. And there's very few exceptions to that in certain kinds of features where maybe sometimes that necessarily isn't true. But in a lot of cases, we need to know what the main character is trying to do at all times, and we need to know what both that overriding difficult external journey is, and we need to know what is the thing happening with their brain, with their emotions, as they change from one kind of person to another kind of person by the end. That is going to be both supported and supporting your external journey. So don't set up these recurring situations. We're looking for a character that changed when this thing happened this one time. And then we want a unique and fascinating hook, like a sense of irony, some new or surprising point of view, or some variation or interesting mashup of otherwise familiar elements. So let's take more log lines, and we'll see what we have next. We did Morgana, we did Joe, we did Maria. Let's do Saturn.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing well. Why don't you read
Good.
out your logline for us? Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so the inspiration. Struggling to write his next masterpiece, perfectionist author is invited to an old friend's house, secretly infatuated with him, showcasing her own captivating book. As deadlines amount onto his desperation and a thunderstorm approaches, he tries to resist the malicious temptation to steal it.
Okay, thanks for this. Let me read this one more time. Struggling to write his next masterpiece, a perfectionist author is invited to an old friend's house, secretly infatuated with him. Okay, so two men together in a secluded home, I'm guessing. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. Our main character is a woman, right?
No. So the author is a man, and the other, his old friend, the old friend is a woman.
Oh, she is. Okay. So, as deadlines amount onto his desperation and a thunderstorm approaches, he tries to resist the temptation to steal it. The thing is, framing the entire... I like the setup here, but framing the entire conflict about a guy trying to resist a temptation, that's just such an internal process. Don't you agree? Like, that...
Yeah.
Framing it that way tells me it's about a guy sitting in a room sweating, like, kind of... like, do we have a... How do we know... Like, what is the actual... What are we actually watching him do? What is the interesting action that we're watching take place here?
Well, essentially, for like the first half, it's kind of like he's sort of, at first, he's trying to like approach it normally, like he's trying to write his own version, he's trying to resist it, like he has it in the corner of his mind kind of thing, and he's facing writer's block, so it's like he's kind of having this problem, like he's trying to deal with his own problems, and then I think it's just like it moves on, like out of desperation, he starts to go, okay, actually, maybe... because I've got these deadlines toppling on me and I've got like not much time, I could actually kind of steal it. And he goes to like certain lengths, and he's kind of pushed to like extreme to go further and further, and he sort of, it's almost like a corruption in a sense.
So is he primarily interacting? It's just the two of them at the house, isn't it?
Yeah, just the two of them. Yeah, like so she's invited him to the house, and so she's written this book. Ideally for him, it's not. She doesn't even want like any fame. She just wants his attention. Like this is her moment, and he doesn't really see that. And I think she tries all these sort of like techniques to try and get his attention, and yet he doesn't. Yet she doesn't succeed, and it's that sort of thing where. She's trying to get his attention. He doesn't get it because he's too focused on his own self, and he doesn't care in a sense.
Okay, and you're framing this as a horror drama. What's scary about this?
I think it's again like psychological in a sense. It's very much like, as I said with like the comparison, like sort of Eraserhead kind of style. Where it's like we have these like sort of like visions. It sort of like haunts him. Like it also almost like sort of cripples his sanity in a sense. Like it gives him like a warped perception of things around him, and it almost gets more. And you can see like throughout the film, like you see like him getting more violent with himself, like taking his anger out on certain things. And he starts to manifest, and that anger starts to manifest that like externally, and it gets worse and worse to the point where like it sort of like culminates like a crescendo of like just violence in a sense.
Okay, so your main character is the sort of threat of this movie, is what you're saying?
Yeah, he's like the anti-hero pretty much of this entire thing.
Okay. So because this is horror, I would just in the logline try to revise this in such a way to highlight what the actual threat is. Because just given how this is laid out here, I'm like, what is the main character really struggling against besides just temptation? When really you're saying this is sort of the story of a guy going crazy and threatening this woman as you're saying he's considering killing her, or his sort of impulses are forcing him to get violent with her?
Alluded, yeah. I think that's like sort of like his temptation. Like it's sort of like pushing him, but like I think it's that like sort of inner battle within himself kind of thing. Like he's trying to like resist it. Like it says, like resist it. But again, it's the problem that like it depends like how I want to frame. I mean that's like I'm trying to like figure out like how to frame it with like the first like Act 2A kind of thing is like how do you frame him like trying to like go through this journey. Because I think really the main point, the problem I've got is that everything is on the latter half of the story, so it's like trying to like establish like what can I sort of fill in like at the beginning, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, it sounds like there's just have you seen movies based on plays? Like have you watched? You should, definitely check out. Well, I'm thinking more like you should watch Sleuth or Death Trap with Michael Caine, both of Michael Caine, from like the 70s and 80s. And those are this sort of genre of just two people in a house together trying to outwit each other, kind of that genre. Is that that's sort of what you're doing to some extent, right? Mixed with like The Shining, kind of is. So you're saying,
so again, like I think every time I think of it, it does kind of feel like Shining every time I think of it. But at the same time, it's like I'm trying to stray away from it. If that makes sense. Like I'm trying to make it its own thing, but while like I can still appreciate the film because it is still like one of my favorite films of all time, along with like many others of like horror and just thrillers in general. So it's like I try and mix all of them together. It's kind of like comes back to it, but at the same time, I want to make it its own individual thing still. Like, and I mean, like, the whole writer's block thing. It's just like it's just something I wanted to build a bit more on, if that makes sense.
Think of the genres that each of them writes or specializes in, and see if there's something there. Is what I would sort of recommend. Nacho was even asking, are there going to be scenes in this that are sort of like in the stories that they are writing, or does their work start to bleed together into reality to some extent? Maybe like in something like Seven Psychopaths, which is a great movie. Or what was it called? Nocturnal Animals had a sort of vibe like this as well. So something to think about there, just to make this not just feel like this just sort of sounds like The Shining.
No, yeah.
And maybe you think of the setting or the location that this takes place in. Like, does that provide us some kind of unique or fascinating game?
Yeah, I'll say, because
live in the Arctic. Like, what are we doing?
It's like, because the difference between them is like he's very much in the city, so he's very like he has connections, where so basically he's invited to her house, and it's like she lives in the middle of nowhere. She is rural, and she lives in her passed away father's house, and she's inherited it basically, and she lives off inheritance. So she lives quite a lonely life herself, which is kind of like the drive for that desire for love. Whereas he is more focused in like the urban life, where he is sort of like he has that focus of just trying to like bring himself up with his like aspirations, and he wants to like achieve that ideal like life of success and everything, you know.
Okay, sure, yeah. I think that like the characters that you have are it sounds like an interesting combination. Just try to find more interesting description of what they'll really be doing. Think of the setting itself. Think of the different games that you can suggest that we're going to play. Think of like the conflict that could spring between them. And this is going to be a movie with lots of sort of twists, I imagine. It was just like how these kind of things work.
Yeah,
so
like with that, like their
history. Build a little mystery. You know, it might be like, you know, they're stuck in a cabin over the course of one weekend that has, you know, more it has secret rooms in it, or it has like its own strange history. It's haunted or something. You see what I mean? Like just something to bring specificity and danger to the location might be useful.
No, yeah, exactly. I'll say not too Parasite, but yeah, I still want to like respect that kind of thing. Sure. Like just like still like have its twists and everything.
Yeah. So look up, if you haven't seen it, Death Trap. I think it's from like 1982.
And what was the other one? Sorry, yeah.
Sleuth from like the 70s.
Sleuth, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Based on a play by Anthony Schaefer. So those are both really great. The Sleuth is with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine. It's great. So yeah, that's the similar sort of genre. I think you'll get a lot out of those.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Saturn. All right, Tara.
Hello.
Hi, Tara.
I think that I've definitely brought this into Logline Workshop or something before, but I don't remember which draft I shared last time. So this is untitled so far, a coming-of-age drama. When her father gives her the task of spying on her rebellious teenage brother, a young girl must infiltrate the Bush-era punk rock scene, earn her brother's trust, and help him turn his act around before he gets sent to military school.
All right. Yeah, I remember some early versions of this. This has been rewritten a bit. Let me read it again. When her father gives her the task of spying on her rebellious teen brother. And when you say young, how young do you mean?
She's like 10 or 11.
Okay. Must infiltrate. Because that, I guess, just makes a big difference when they're infiltrating the punk rock scene.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So I would maybe even say 10-year-old girl in this case, because... Okay. You know, you can say a young girl could be someone who's like, 20, or you could, or, 8 or 15. It could be almost anything 20 or under. It could be, a young girl. So, 10-year-old girl must infiltrate the Bush era punk rock scene. I guess let me just ask, why do we call out that it's the Bush era?
Because it's relevant to the conflict between the dad and the brother. Because the dad is very pro-Bush and the brother is very anti-Bush, and that's that has to do with a lot more, like there's deeper conflict between them, but that's kind of like the surface level how you would understand it.
Okay. I think that works. It does feel specific, and it's a succinct way of putting that, and feels like these sort of coming-of-age dramedy sort of things. Like, this is like a Lady Bird sort of thing, where Lady Bird took place in, Sacramento in the early 2000s or whatever, so it just sort of feels like it comes more from someone's specific life to put it at a specific time and place like that, so no big deal there. She must infiltrate the rock scene, earn her brother's trust, This seems like it would actually, a 10-year-old girl entering the punk rock scene, to me seems like it would draw lots of attention to it, which would almost, I don't know if that would help or hurt her goal. But I guess I'm saying a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. To earn her brother's trust and help him turn his act around before he gets sent to military school. I really like the specificity and the ticking clock and the like sort of deadline in the walls of the story. Yeah, I guess the only thing is really specify how old she exactly is. Beyond that, I have questions, but I think you've pretty much done all the work you need to do. These are questions that like I should have and that you don't need to answer necessarily. Let me ask, was there anything on this that you felt unclear about or that you weren't sure about?
I do think there's something a little bit awkward about the infiltrate the Bush era punk rock scene, which I don't know if I'm giving too much. I think the reason that I put that in there was because I think we had a conversation about what kind of world this movie would introduce you to, or like what the atmosphere would kind of be.
Yeah, I think you've done it well.
Okay, cool. I can change this later. Okay.
I would keep it as is. I was wondering, reading over it, I guess once I asked you about it, it sort of clarified why you're specifically doing that. So right now, I think just go for it. Keep it like this, and then it'll give us a sort of sense of this is, like probably 2002 to 2006 or whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Okay, great. If you could find a title that really clarifies the hook, I think you'll be in good shape for this one. Because it is a high concept idea that could be quite sort of goofy and slapsticky and wacky, like Hot Rod kind of tone, or this feels like it could be more like, you've listed Little Miss Sunshine as one of your comps, so I'm guessing you want this to be sort of more serious, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Little Miss Sunshine hits a weird tone that is a mix of, I mean, like they're pushing a car the whole time. Like it feels a little bit slapstick, but it's very serious subject matter otherwise, and that's what I was going for.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, nice work.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you. Good work, Tara. Yeah, you're almost ready to start this one, I think, or start. I don't know how far you are in your sketchbook or whatever, but
I'm not at all.
You're not. Okay. Well, you can start filling it out, I would say.
Cool.
All right, thank you. We have one more to do, I believe. Or maybe two more. I think we only have time for one, though. Let's go to Joe Toole with Chiaroscuro. Am I saying that right? Is he here with us? I'm doing my seance. Is he here with us now? Joe? Okay, we're going to move down to, I think we had one more. Unless he comes back. I think, did we have one from Tifa? Go ahead, Tifa.
Yes. So what should I say apart from what I posted?
Go ahead and read it out loud.
Oh, an introverted 12-year-old boy whose only true friend is his older sister falls in love for the first time. But when his classmate unexpectedly returns his affections, he must grow to learn that romance is no easy cure for loneliness.
All right, thank you for this. And is this is an idea, or is this a script you've already written?
Oh, I'm actually on the third draft, and my process is I very much, in the first or second draft, I do a lot of pre-writing, and I have a hard time imagining things in summary form. Like I need the concreteness of the here and now, and then I kind of see what I have written, and I try to extract something that could be, extract an outline from it that could be the basis for further revision.
Okay. As I mentioned before, this course here is focused on original, new feature ideas instead of revision, and we have a separate revision course that would be able to work with you more on this. But I can still give feedback if you want on just what you have here. So an introverted 12-year-old boy whose only true friend is his older sister falls in love for the first time. I'm guessing with his classmate. You're saying, and when she unexpectedly returns his affections, he must grow to learn that romance is no easy cure for loneliness is just kind of like the theme of the movie, or like the dramatic argument of the movie to me, rather than saying what the characters actually have to do. And this is a little bit of what I was talking about a little while ago about what does Frodo have to do in Lord of the Rings, right? Well, he has to come to terms with the hero that he was destined to be and inherit the mantle of the ring bearer and like all these internal things, right? But at the end of the day, what does he have to do? Throw a ring in a volcano. So you can see how even with this slice of life internal conflict kind of story, you can still frame it around some kind of event. We were just talking about Little Miss Sunshine, weren't we? Which is, I think you'd agree, a pretty character-driven story, right? It's not a super, super heavy plot-based movie, but it still has a final finish line of some kind, right? And the final finish line being the girl needs to compete in a dance contest. So if you have some external thing like that just to frame the events around, it can just help us understand it as a movie a little better.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's helpful to know.
If it's a wedding, if it's a birthday party, that it's all work leading up to, like, if as long as it matters to the characters, then it can matter to us. But I guess I would just try to like really zero in on what is that sort of central event or like a catalyst for. I think the catalyst for the story is the kid falling in love. But what does the sort of second act look like? What is the conflict, and what does our character actually have to physically do? So find that external journey for us, and it'll like we will understand that through the course of this external journey, the journey of the relationship will sort of weave through that, and our main character will change accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Any questions on this?
I guess. Yeah, actually, no. That's fine because I didn't realize this had to be like a fresh log line, but it's been helpful to hear.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, we should have a new rewrite course starting in like 3 weeks. Or you could stick with this one and write something new, or you could stick with this one and start from square one on something. Totally up to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're at the end of our time for today. If you want to enroll, go to scriptcamp.net/membership. We have all the info there at the bottom of the screen. So thanks for stopping by. My name is Connor, and we will look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event. Go to scriptcamp.net/events/month if you want to see all of our calendar of upcoming stuff. Joe Toole says, can you ask me? I guess, do we have one more logline to do? Okay, we'll do one more logline if Joe Toole is back. Go ahead and read it out loud for us.
Sorry. Trying to go back up to it.
But thanks for coming by, everybody. Feel free to check out and again, scriptcamp.net for all the membership info and sign up details. All right, let's do this last log line.
Oh, sorry, man.
This is Chiaro
you hear me?
Skuro. Yep, we hear you.
Oh, yeah, cool. It's Chiara Skuro. I wrote a few because I'm kind of struggling with condensing it to a log line, but you can help me. Essentially, an art gallery security guard investigates the disappearance of a painting while trying to find the meaning of life. Or after his favorite painting disappears from its gallery, an asocial security guard falls into immorality as he interrogates his uninterested colleagues before a new gallery replaces the artwork. Or an introverted security guard of an art gallery is tempted into using immoral tactics as he investigates the disappearance of his favorite artwork.
Definitely the third one.
Yep.
And we can change the third one a little bit more. I like how you have the specificity of the introverted security guard. And that's going to sort of, I imagine, be something that he's struggling with or that makes his life more difficult. He's tempted into using immoral tactics as he investigates the disappearance of his favorite painting. While trying to find the meaning of life might be something you can just cut and leave out of the logline. I mean, I like that that's part of what the character's trying to do internally in the story, but I just think it's kind of being a stumbling block in the logline, whereas the basics there without that are strong enough and probably where you want to kind of leave it. I would say the immoral tactics as he investigates the disappearance of his favorite painting. Does he have to do this before thieves sell it or something like that? Or is this going to be more of like a psychological story of this guy going kind of into this solving this crime and going crazy, or is this like observe and report, or like what exactly are we doing here?
Well, it's not as extreme as one of the earlier examples of the author, but in terms of like psychological or horror, but it's more about that same sort of structure of a character sort of losing their original way of doing things as they're pursuing a goal. He becomes more and more immoral as he goes. The reason why I added like it's due to his desperation essentially. Like the closer it gets to a deadline of them replacing the artwork instead of actually trying to find it, he's essentially the only one that really cares about actually finding this artwork.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's essentially him. Like the other thing as well is like he's trying to do this to gain the respect of his colleagues. He thinks if he can do this, he can show competence.
I see.
And essentially, no one really cares about it, despite also being something that they valued. So it's this weird thing where he's put in a position where he's trying to show his value, providing them the thing that he thinks that they want. Essentially, the whole idea is like towards the end, as he gets more and more desperate, he starts to realize that none of them actually care. So he ends up stealing an artwork, not actually finding the other artwork, but steals this artwork and it leads to his demise essentially. But the reason why I put the meaning of life thing is because that is essentially what the artwork is meant to be representative of. Whilst he's doing all of this and interrogating people, he's also questioning their value systems, but he's also changing his own. As he's trying to find this painting, he's also trying to find answers to where it is. And essentially, whilst he's trying to find answers to where the painting is, he's also finding about different value systems of the people around him, which is making him just more and more confused. And
it's just that's still just internal stuff, though. It's like saying,
but it's the whole point is that he doesn't actually get what he wants in the end because he never actually finds the artwork. The answer that he finds is that he does find meaning in life as he dies, and it's essentially the answer that he comes up with is that the answer isn't an answer, but it's the pursuit of meaning. It's the actual pursuit of meaning, and that's where the contradiction is. Like he finds that from pursuing something and not actually getting an answer to where it was.
Right.
So
but we really just have to focus on the external goal in a long line.
Okay. Yeah. No, I understand that.
So I think that's all great stuff for the script, but just for the all we're working on at the moment is the logline itself. In which case I would say that he's the real stakes and danger here need to be highlighted if your main character is going to be the sort of threat of this. Like if his own demons, so to speak, his own unhinged nature or sanity is going to be what's like driving the story and causing stakes to be in place, because you're saying, in fact, the stakes are quite low. It's just his lack of sanity or his unhinged nature which is causing the stakes to be there.
Not necessarily sanity, it's more desperation. Like he just even the amount of immorality is only extends as far as just lying and trying to manipulate.
Oh, he's not like killing people?
He's not going like crazy. The worst thing he does essentially is steal the artwork in the end.
Oh.
That's what I mean. It's not really as crazy in extent, so it's hard to explain. Like the reason why I put drama, thriller, and crime is because there's a bit of like a tonal shift that happens around the midpoint, kind of like almost like almost like Parasite, I guess, is a good example where it's very much like there's actually similarities in the sense where it starts to build towards essentially thinks he has found the answers, essentially changed himself, thinks he's found the answer as to where this painting's going to be, realizes not only has he not found where the painting is, and not only has he not found himself, he's completely lost himself. And so it becomes now that like desperation, like it just only makes it more and more and more intense. And that's when he starts relying on less and less things, essentially.
All right. Well, that is a bit more in depth than we can go today because we're all at the end of our time, and we're just working on log lines now. So hopefully you can take.
Are there any tips though for that last one?
Yeah, take out sure. I would take out the sort of meaning of life stuff. I would highlight so if the stakes are going to be the main character is kind of becoming dangerous in his behavior, or if he's causing more and more dangerous situations. If that's what is like increasing the stakes here and making things like more difficult for your main character, I would kind of bring that to the forefront too, because I'm like, if we have thriller and crime here, I want to know where the actual danger is coming from. So yeah, try to clarify those things, and I think that you'll be much further along the right track.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna call it for today. And scriptcamp.net is the website to check out. We also have video library for all our subscribers, so you can view these things later on if you miss a class, or if you just want to see what the other classes get up to. All right, so thanks so much, folks. We will see you at the next one. Next official class starts next week, so try to improve your logline using the pointers that you got today. Work on the sketchbook, filling that out as much as you can, and we'll see you next time. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a good night.